There we go. So can I just see, before we start, just with a show of hands, how many people have not been to one of our events before? Wow, okay. And thanks for coming out. And for the new people that have arrived here, how did you hear? So I'm gonna ask, did you guys get a flyer in the mail? Can you put your hand up? Quite a few. And how many of you heard about it on social media? Couple. How many of you talked to somebody you know? A couple friends brought you in? Great. Thanks for coming out. All right. So my name's Jeff Snycer, like I said. I was born here in Kamloops. I've lived here my whole life. For about 10 years, though, I did leave. I went to Alberta, then traveled all over the world, did all sorts of things. I've got some letters after my name there. I studied electronics engineering, and I worked in oil and gas for a few years, so that's my background. Recently came back to Canada during COVID, and I'm the father of two young boys. I got a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I'm a very proud Canadian. And tonight, I'm gonna walk you guys through what sustainable development is. And it's kind of crucial that we learn about this because it's gonna give you the context to understand what we're gonna talk about when we get into the housing stuff, which is what you saw on the flyer. So first, we're gonna go through sustainable development. We're gonna talk about how housing and reducing CO2 fits into that. Then we're going to get into the specific alterations code, which I'm sure a lot of you saw on the flyer, and it's probably why you came. And we'll show you exactly where in the legislation it talks about that, and show you exactly what's coming for BC. We're going to talk about something called the PACE program, which is a government lending program, and we'll talk about whether or not it's actually feasible to do what the government says they're going to do by electrifying everything to reduce CO2. Lastly, we'll get into some of the economic stuff, and if we got any time, we might dip into some other subjects, but this should probably take about 45 minutes, and I'm going to load you guys up with a lot of information tonight, so it's going to go pretty quick. But if there's anything that you guys, if you have a question in between, just put your hand up and I'll try and get to you. But if it's a big question, try and save it for the end, and we'll have an open mic for everybody to ask whatever you'd like, okay? So a lot of the subjects we're going to talk about tonight, a bit complicated, and the way these things are framed in the media often, I'll give you an example, it's always black and white. It's either you're for this or you're against this. So you're either for climate stuff or you're against the climate stuff. But I want to give you an example. So there's always a good reason for everything provided, but that doesn't mean that everything in the plans that the government is talking about are necessarily good for you. There could be something bad in there. And an example I like to use is, say if you went to see a doctor and you said, hey doctor, my finger hurts. And you think maybe he's going to give you an aspirin, and then he ends up cutting off your arm. He's actually solved the problem. And he says, well, I've solved your problem, but maybe you really just wanted an aspirin. So, that's the nuance in these subjects, and we have to pay attention to the details because it is a big deal and it will affect us in different ways. Another way to talk about this is a spoonful of sugar with a drop of cyanide. So if something's being marketed to you, it could sound really good. They could talk about the positive aspects, but that doesn't mean that there's not a drop of cyanide in there, and you might eat that sugar and it might look good, it might taste good, but it's still going to kill you at the end of the day. So that's what we're going to pay attention to today, is those drops of cyanide. So how many people here, I'll just ask all the new people, quite a few of you, have you heard the term sustainable development before? Show of hands. Quite a few, yeah? It was on the flyer, so I guess so. Yeah, we're learning, guys. We don't do this every day. So when I think of sustainable development, I think of a way of developing economically, building industry in a way that's good for the environment, and I think that's what most people generally think of. But what we're going to show you today is actually a lot more than that. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is what you think it is, but there's so much more. We're going to show you what that is. So to do that, we'll give you the historical context. This is a story from Kamloops this week, May 22nd, 1991. Okay, this is from the Round Table series. This was done under Bill Vander Zalm. They sent out groups of experts around British Columbia to ask BC residents, what do you think sustainable development is? They came up with this definition. They said, That sustainable development is ensuring that our use of resources in the environment today does not damage the prospect of their being used by future generations, which sounds kind of reasonable. But even at that time, it was pointed out in 1991 that sustainable development is in fact an oxymoron. You cannot sustain something that you are developing, and you cannot develop something that you are sustaining. It's either or. So we'll look a little bit more at the history. This guy here, his name is Maurice Strong. He's a Canadian oil man from Alberta. He's a pretty famous guy, actually. There's a lot of history behind him. He led the very first United Nations Conference on Health and the Environment in 1972. He was good friends with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. This is the 1976 conference in Vancouver called Habitat 1. They dealt with a lot of the same issues. Then a report came out in 1987 called Our Common Future. This is also referred to as the Brundtland Report, and this is where this term sustainable development came from. This is where it became popularized. In 1990, there was a group created at the United Nations in New York, and it's called ICLEI. It stands for the International, I'm not sure I'm going to get that one, the International Consortium of Local Environmental Initiatives, I think is what it stands for, okay? And they were created with a specific purpose in mind, and we'll show you what that is. And they were getting ready for, there's 1991, the roundtable, for 1992. ICLEI was created to prepare for 1992, and something very important happened in 1992. 176 countries from around the world met in Rio de Janeiro, and they discussed something that was called the Earth Summit. And something really important that came out of that, because at that time they were talking about the ozone layer, acid rain, saving the environment, there's too much garbage, there's plastic in the water. If you guys remember, Captain Planet was on TV back then. And they came up with something called Agenda 21. But I won't tell you guys what Agenda 21, I'll let the government of Canada tell you what Agenda 21 is, okay? And by the way, this Maurice Strong, he said in 1992, he was also the chair of that conference in 1992, I forgot to mention. He said that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are unsustainable. So that was the result of that conference. So we'll go back to Kamloops this week, 1992. This is leading up to Agenda 21 in Rio in 1992. And here they say, Agenda 21 will be a blueprint for global sustainable development. So they're telling you that Agenda 21 is the blueprint for sustainable development. So if we want to learn about sustainable development, it started with Agenda 21. This is a document. It's called the Municipal Primer on the United Nations Conference. So this is the document that summarized the meeting in 1992. And here they tell us that Agenda 21 recognizes that unsustainable development includes suburban sprawl, continued dependence on the private automobile, and residential development which favors single, detached homes. That was in 1992. And this is not my words, this is from this document, which was created for the FCM, which is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and it was also created for the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. And this was distributed to Canadian municipalities in 1994. They summarize some of the big changes that came out of that conference in 1992. There was some doctrinal changes that came out of there. And what they said was that to achieve sustainable development, that environmental protection shall constitute an integral part of the development process and cannot be considered in isolation. That means no matter what we do with development, we always have to consider the environment going forward. States should reduce and eliminate unsustainable patterns of production and development. So we have to stop all the unsustainable things. And something else, they want to use something called the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle in medicine means you don't give out drugs and medicine to people unless it's been thoroughly tested. Good idea, right? You see what happens if we don't pay attention to that. And what they're saying here is that we must do sustainable development to save the environment as a precaution because we don't know what will happen if we don't save the environment. So it's kind of like the precautionary principle backwards. We don't know what's going to happen if we do sustainable development, but we're going to do it anyways because of the precautionary principle. And out of this, we got one last doctrinal change for all the municipalities, which is think globally and act locally. Think globally and act locally. Because now we have a worldwide problem, but to save the world, we all have to act in our local municipal areas to do that. This is another document, official document. This one was commissioned by the IDRC, which is the International Development and Research Council. This is a Crown corporation. And you see, it was also funded by ICLEI. That was that group that started in 1990. ICLEI wrote and was heavily involved with creating Agenda 21, which was the blueprint for sustainable development. And this is their document called Local Agenda 21. And this was supposed to go out to all the municipalities in the world so that they could think globally and act locally. And this is explaining them how to do that. So here's a little bit more about ICLEI, just to let you know what their mission was. So this is from their very first founding document, the very first document they ever put out, the United Nations in 1990. It was at the World Congress of Local Government. They say that local governments must begin to restructure social and economic life at the local level. So it's about restructuring economic and social life. And they go on to say that global problems can only be solved through a restructuring of human society at the local level. They're not talking about saving the environment. They're talking about restructuring the economy and our social systems. That's what they're talking about. So if we look back, we saw that goes all the way back into history, but now we have a current definition for what sustainable development is. And this is from the Sustainable Development Act. This is a federal act in Canada. This is the law in Canada. And it tells us the basic principles of sustainable development, which is that it's based on an efficient use of natural, social, and economic resources. So the environment, the economy, and social resources. And that we can't make any decisions unless we integrate those three things into all of our decisions. And then in the very first point, so they're telling us there it's everything. And in the very first point, they go on to tell us that the principle of sustainable development is a continually evolving concept. It's undefined. And if we go back, here, this is what they told us in 1996. It says sustainable development has yet to be fully defined. So it's 30 years later, and we still haven't defined it. We've been doing it for 30 years, and nobody knows what the start point is. Nobody knows what the end point is. Nobody knows what it includes or what it excludes. It's everything and it's nothing all at once. But they have told us what's unsustainable. So that's Maurice Strong was telling us the patterns of development which are unsustainable. So automobiles, air conditioning, appliances, eating meat, suburban homes, fossil fuels, rural living, farming, fertilizer, flying. The list is quite extensive. And the reason why these things keep getting called out as being unsustainable is because they create a lot of carbon, and we'll get into that in a minute. So the modern version of sustainable development, now that you know the history, is called the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is something from the United Nations. There's 17 policy directives called the Sustainable Development Goals. These are all the different goals here, and it covers everything from poverty, hunger, health, resources, energy, water, equity, gender, education, economy. It's everything. It's basically everything. And under each one of those goals, there's key performance indicators as well. So it's a very expansive policy. And what I would call the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm a project manager, is it looks like a project. And this is a project that's being managed to push these goals out to all the countries that have signed up to it. Another way to think of it, and there's Stephen Guillebeau, he's our environment minister. You see he's got this little sustainable development goal pin on his shirt. You'll often see this on our federal politicians' lapels. They like to wear it. This is a Venn diagram from the United Nations. This is from the Sustainable Development website. And what they're telling us here, so just like I told you earlier, it's not just the environment, it's social and economic. It's all three of those things. And they're telling us here that these three things combined in the middle is sustainable development. But what I'd like you to do is think about what that actually means. What is the abstract concept that they're telling you about? They're telling you that a government-managed environment, government-managed social values, and government-managed economy is going to give you sustainable development. So it sounds like they're just talking about government management in every aspect of our life. And when you zoom out and look at all these policies, that's really what sustainable development is. So, will sustainable development even solve our environmental problems? No. I'm going to say no, and I'll tell you why. So this little chart here, this shows the amount of CO2 that's being produced by China. Okay? This is 1994. That's our recent number there. Last headline, this is from March 2nd, that China is building 2 coal-fired power plants per week. There's 1.4 billion people in China that are trying to come up to middle-class lifestyle. They're very hungry for energy. And here's an article. It says, this is from 1994. It says, Agenda 21 addresses how China, with the world's largest population of 1.2 billion and rapidly rising levels of consumption and pollution, can realize its economic hopes without throwing the environment into chaos. Everybody's seen what's happening in China. The environment is in complete chaos in China. Okay, so China's not doing sustainable development. And in a minute, you'll see why this is important. So this is CO2 emissions. This is for the whole world. This big pink one here, this is China. And they're going like this. They're creating more and more and more. We're shipping all of our manufacturing to China. Okay? They're continuing to go. They're making more and more coal-fired power plants. They're not going to stop making CO2. And this little guy right here, this is Canada, the little blue one. Okay, so that's the context. So when people are talking to you and they say, you need to put a heat pump in your house, you need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a renovation, you need to buy an EV, you need to get rid of your diesel truck, driving a car is selfish and you're hurting the environment. Put that in context for a second. Buying things from China is hurting the environment. Okay, buying things from India is hurting the environment. This is India, by the way, right here. These two are expanding exponentially. So that's the badly needed context we need for the conversation. And when we get back to these sustainable development goals, number 13 is something called climate action, which I would just summarize as cutting CO2. That's what climate action is. And they tell you here, this is the Paris Agreement that we'll get into in a second. You see it's got the Sustainable Development Goal circle on it. They're one and the same, and they even tell you here, they say that climate action is intrinsically linked to all 16 of the other goals in the 2030 goals. They are one and the same. So how many people here know about the Paris Agreement? Probably heard about it in the news. I think Donald Trump pulled out of it in the States. That was a pretty big deal. And now they're right back in there. And you can say what you can about Donald Trump, but I think it was actually a good move, and I'll explain to you guys why. This is from the Paris Agreement website. And it says right here that implementation of the Paris Agreement requires economic and social transformation. It's not talking about saving the environment, it's talking about changing the way you live, your social values, and the economy. And it goes on to say that it works on 5-year cycles. So it started in 2015, that was the first 5-year cycle. All the countries that signed on to this, they had 5 years to come up with their climate action plans, which you saw. They accounted for their greenhouse gases, they got their plans lined up, and right when COVID hit in 2020, that's right around the time 2019, 2020, and 2021, that's when all these climate plans rolled out. And for us here in Kamloops, I think we started on ours in 2019 and it happened in 2021. Not too much fanfare, not a lot of people know about it. But the next 5-year cycle, and it says, the word that they use here, a continuously ratcheting up of increasingly ambitious climate action. So if you think it's bad now, wait until 2025, because it's going to get that much worse.
And by the way, this is a legally binding international treaty that we signed. So this is the source of all the climate action you see here locally. This is where it's coming from. Very quickly, we need to just talk about this concept. It's individual rights versus collective rights. You'll watch the media now, they say, you know, it's selfish to do this, you need to save the environment, and what they're talking about is saving the world. This is collective rights. The world belongs to everybody. Water belongs to everybody. The air belongs to everybody, so we have to protect it. And I agree, I don't think we should be polluting, I don't think we should be wasting the world's resources. But at the same time, if it belongs to everybody, it belongs to nobody. And if we're doing something to save the whole world, how do we know when we save the whole world? Where is the objective criteria? What do we know where the start point is, and how do we know when the stop point is? And how do you know how much you have to give up as an individual person? How much government interference into your life are you willing to accept to achieve that goal? Right? You have guaranteed individual rights in Canada. But right now, the way the media is talking is that that's not really important because we all have to save the world. But nobody's giving you an objective criteria. So they say 2 degrees of the CO2 targets, but they're not really saying how that's going to affect your life. And that's what we're going to show you tonight, okay? So essentially what we're doing is writing a blank check. So just a recap on sustainable development. Agenda 21 is sustainable development. If you Google this, you're going to find all sorts of wacky stuff on the internet. You'll hear politicians and people telling you that this is not a real thing, but it is absolutely a real thing. It's all over the government of Canada's website. We even paid for it. Okay, everything we must do from now forward must be sustainable because of the climate. We have to do everything through the lens of climate change. We have now a collective philosophy, which is supposed to be more important than your individual rights. We have to think globally and act locally. Sustainable development cannot be defined, it's always changing, so we've now committed our entire society, economy, and we're changing everything to something that has no definition. It's a new legal and legislative doctrine. There's no proof necessary because of the precautionary principle. The plans were not conceived or written in Canada, and they are not for benefit of Canadians. Okay, it was written by international consultants. Much of our modern life is currently considered unsustainable, and it requires undefined economic and social transformation. And at the end of the day, it's just going to result in more government control and interference in your life. And that's literally what they tell you with their Venn diagram. And finally, it's not going to stop the next atmospheric river, it's not going to stop the next forest fire, and it's not going to stop climate change, as we saw. So, now we'll get down a little bit locally. So, that's the context. Now, you guys in this room know more about sustainable development and climate change than most people, most politicians. They don't teach it like that in school. So this is goal number 13, climate action, and Kamloops has in 2021 re-released a climate action plan. I had a copy of it here. There's some copies around the back. I recommend you guys to have a flip through. They're printed out, and if you want to check what we're showing here, the copies are here. Please don't take them, they're expensive to print, but if you want to have a look, they're there for you. So in there they talk about cutting CO2. And there's really only 3 sources of CO2 to cut. Number 1 is transportation. So this is private automobiles. That's why we have to move away from the private automobile. If you go through the Clean BC program from the NDP, they talk about that quite a bit. It's discussed a lot in our climate action plan in Kamloops. Number 2 is housing. Old, inefficient homes create a lot of CO2. Burning natural gas, even though I feel it's a clean and efficient source of energy, creates CO2. And these are the only sources they have to cut. And then way down at the bottom, they got solid waste. It's about 5%. These are the numbers from Kamloops. This is the inventory from Kamloops. And then if you look at housing, okay, I think this one's not so accurate. I found this chart online. You can find different ones. This says your appliances are only 1%, but I've seen other charts that show it's about 10 or 20. It really depends on what climate you live in. But the majority of the energy you use in your home is for water heating and space heating. So that's your furnace, your forced air convection, and your water heater. So how can we reduce the CO2 from housing? Well, number one, we can change the building codes so that future homes are more efficient and create less CO2. And we see that with the step code, which we'll get into. The other thing, and this is what's discussed in our climate action plan here in Kamloops and at a provincial and a federal level, which I'll show you both, is that they want to retrofit all of the old homes. So this is where we get into the mandatory retrofit discussion, which we'll get into more depth. We can also switch to lower carbon forms of energy, so that's why they want to do away with natural gas. And then there's another thing, this is from British BC Hydro. It's something called DSM, which is demand side measures, which is trying to reduce the amount of energy that you use and change the way that you use energy. So it's affecting the demand, it's reducing the demand. So here's our Premier, David Eby. He's wearing a shirt that says, "I love heat pumps." And heat pumps are great. They are, guys, they absolutely are on an energy efficiency, like compared to natural gas, they are more energy efficient. Cost-wise, without the carbon tax, may or may not be a win, depends on your house and how efficient it is, but a lot of case studies show it's less efficient, or it's more pricey to heat with a heat pump because you're using more electricity. Your bill will be higher, even though on an energy equivalent basis, you're using less energy. That's true. But in 2030, the step code will kick in and there will be no more gas heating. That will be banned. All new builds after 2030, no more gas. And they don't want net zero, they want zero carbon. I'll show you guys a quote from Clean BC here in a moment. This is the step code. How many people here know about the step code? So we started off in 2017, this was step one. This is our base level. And then we went up 10% and then 20% more efficient. This was this year, in March 2023, we hit step 3. And then 2024, we're going to step 4. We have to be 40% more efficient. 2027, we have to be on step 5. Or maybe this is 27 and this is 2030. I might get that mixed up, apologies. So this is where we are now. And this is the quote from Clean BC. It says, in 2030, the BC building code will require all new buildings to be zero carbon. Not net zero, zero carbon. And of course, what happens when you change the building code to make everything more efficient? You increase the insulation, you increase the thickness of the walls, you increase the building materials as the price goes up. So right now we have a housing shortage, a housing crisis in BC. That's a whole other topic that we'd like to get into in further town halls, but it's making housing more expensive. It absolutely is. And you can even hear in council, like Councillor Beppel mentioned even, that, yeah, arguably it is increasing the prices of houses, and it absolutely is. This is the climate plan from Kamloops. So zero carbon homes and buildings, and this is our target. All new homes and buildings in the community will be net zero energy by 2030, so that's less than the BC target, so that means we're gonna have to come up to meet zero carbon. They're saying net zero, but the BC government's saying zero. And by 2040, they want to retrofit 2% of existing dwellings, they want to retrofit 50% of all the homes at 2% a year by 2050. And that's to reduce the CO2 coming from our existing housing stock. So that's in the Kamloops Climate Action Plan. What is a retrofit? So this is the actual definition from the Kamloops Climate Action Plan, but it talks about replacing a gas furnace with a heat pump, upgrading the high performance insulation of windows. If anyone's ever done windows, they know that's tens of thousands of dollars. Insulation is a huge job. You know, just to find the trades to actually do the work for you these days, you're paying. And they'll probably sub it out anyways and you'll get a substandard job for short. So it could be all these things, but we're not sure. But they've got a way for us to know what will be required of you. And I'll show you what that is. So now if we go to the federal level, this is called, there was something called the Joint Task Force on Alterations to Existing Buildings. So this came out in 2021. There's a piece of legislation called the Pan-Canadian Framework that was put out by Justin Trudeau, started in 2016 when he got his mandate for environment, when he got voted in, the Liberals federally. They put this Pan-Canadian Framework in place, which is the Canadian government's way to keep everybody accountable for the Paris Accord climate targets. So that means that everybody has to reduce their CO2. One of the recommendations of that was to upgrade all the existing home stock. So this task force they were mandated to develop a model code for existing buildings to help guide energy efficiency and improvements. There's a link, and by the way, all the stuff I'm talking about, guys, this will all be on our website. There will be a link on every single one of these slides. You can see the PDF, click on this, verify it for yourself. Every single slide has a link on it. So what they came up with was this code, and they stress it has to be, quote, voluntary, but there has to be triggers that trigger the voluntary mandatory upgrade that you don't want to do in your house. Okay? And one of them is maintenance or repair of the systems in your house, so that could be your electrical system, your heating system. Another one is the change of occupancy type. So if you have a renter, and then the renter moves out, and then you're owner occupied, that could be a different type of ownership. Or if you sell your home, that could be a change of ownership. It's not defined yet. We don't know. Okay? If you go in and pull a permit because you want to do an addition or reconfigure a space on your house, then more than likely, if it's just a small space, you'll have to do that small space to a higher standard. Or if it's a big reno, if you're doing an addition to your home, they might tell you you have to do the whole house. And it's not clear who's going to enforce it and how this is going to happen. But you can be darn sure it's going to have something to do with the municipality, and they'll probably be tasked with enforcing it at some level. This is from the Joint Task Force on the federal level. So here they say, this is how we're going to figure out how much money you're going to have to spend to upgrade your house voluntarily. So if you have to do like a small maintenance, patch some drywall or fix a broken window, you're exempt. No big deal. You're in the green. But then they come down here, it's not a small maintenance. Maybe it's systems upgrade, space reconfiguration, change of occupancy, in addition. Now you come down and there's a decision point. Is it a minor or is it a major? And this is just the project area only, and this is all direct affected systems. So that could be the entire house. And now you're looking at 5-figure, maybe 6-figure renovations. Okay, if you can imagine somebody telling you you've got to put 6 figures down to renovate your old house that was built in the 50s before you can sell it, that would, would make me very happy. Let's just put it that way. So is there any evidence that this is happening in BC? Well, it has to because of the Paris Climate Accord, the Pan-Canadian Framework, which holds the provinces to account. And of course, under our NDP government, we have something called the Clean BC Program, and this is their Alterations to Existing Building Program. So here they said in 2022, they're going to release their final strategy. They never did. So we contacted the Ministry of Housing and our MLA. We asked our MLAs if they knew anything about it, and they're busy, we understand that. So we didn't get an answer from them, but we did get an answer directly from the Housing Ministry that said it has been delayed. They haven't released the code yet. So they're keeping it tight. And the reason they're keeping it tight is because at the federal level, they're going to standardize the building code all the way across Canada. Houses in Newfoundland will be built the same as they're going to be built here. So it says here that it's coming in 2024, so that's when they're going to roll it out. And here's an example. To the new people here who haven't been to our previous presentations, I'll quickly tell you what an OCP is. It stands for Official Community Plan. And that's like the overarching bylaw that the city puts in place. You'll find out a lot more. It'll start being in the newspaper because the provinces get involved in this. But here, this is the one from Kelowna. Energy efficiency of existing buildings. They already had this in their OCP because their OCP came out in 2022. It was a recent one. They knew it's coming. And here they have mandatory energy labeling on homes. So if your house isn't efficient, you're going to have to slap a label on it that says it's not. And then maybe it'll be worth less. But maybe because of the way this is going to play out, it might actually be worth more. We don't really know. This is the Canadian Home Builders Association Council. It's got a lot of acronyms there, I forget what it is. But these are the guys that are redoing the federal cross-Canada building code, and as soon as they're done, it'll come out from British Columbia, and then they'll release it in 2024. That's what the housing ministry told us. So how are you guys going to pay for this? A lot of people that live in older homes, they're starter homes, they're smaller, they were cheaper, they're not energy efficient. I live in an older home. We recently did an energy audit on it. It was as good as an 80s home because we had done some work on it. But a lot of homes have drafts, the insulation's poor, and they have old gas furnaces. So if you want to go and replace all the windows and do all that, it's going to cost you $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. How are you going to pay for that if it's mandated from the government? Well, this is something called PACE, and this is how a traditional mortgage works here. So this is first lien, second lien, third lien. Traditionally, if you buy a house, somebody lends you money, it's against the asset. The bank loans money against the house, so if you default, the bank has first lien, they can come in and sell the house and then pay themselves off, and whatever's left is yours, or it goes to the second lien creditor. But this PACE program, which is the government solution to help all of you pay for the retrofits that you can't afford to do in your home, they're gonna take first lien place on your house. This is being discussed in Clean BC, it's discussed in the Kamloops Climate Action Plan, it's discussed by all the policy wonks, it's discussed federally. This is happening. So what's that gonna do? It's gonna drive rent costs up, utility costs up, debt up, home prices, taxes, because that's how you will pay this, is through your taxes. So instead of getting a $3,000 tax bill, you'll get a $10,000 tax bill. And of course, we're in a housing crisis. What's this gonna do? Home ownership will go down. It will become unattainable for more and more people. So how does this work? No credits necessary. The PACE program uses whatever money that you have in the house. What's the word? Equity, thank you. The equity that's in your home is what they're gonna lend against. So it doesn't matter if you have bad credit. The annual payments come out of your property taxes, and it stays with the property. It has nothing to do with you. So now imagine if you're trying to sell your home, and there's a $300, like it works out to $1,000 a month payment to pay that PACE loan off, and somebody's coming to buy your house. But when they consider my credit, they look at, my money in, my money out, how much I can afford to make on a mortgage payment. So I make the mortgage payment, but I also have to make that extra $300 or $500 or $1,000 a month PACE loan, right? Now I can't afford to buy your house. So it's gonna make selling your house harder. Only rich people are gonna be able to buy it. They say, no, don't worry, it's not gonna affect you, it's gonna stay with the home. But it clearly is gonna affect you. So let's do some context here on this PACE loan. We'll see if it's really worth it to do these renovations. So this is just for Kamloops. I did some numbers here. This is actually on my house where I live. The utilities right now, if you work it out for the year, it's about $180 a month, $1,400 a year on gas, and $780 on electric. That's for a two-story home built in the 60s. Okay? And if we did an upgrade and we switched to a heat pump, we're gonna save on gas, so our gas would go to zero, but our electric bill would go up. Okay? And I'm quite conservative here. I said it only goes up $400 a year to run the heat pump all year long. But I'm guessing it's probably gonna go up a lot more than that. I've heard stories of hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars per month in the winter. So if you look at this, on a 15-year, I'm just gonna skip this slide. I'll go to this one because I forget what I did on there. I got all the slides I gotta show you. So from the Kamloops Climate Action Plan, they say the average is you're gonna save $80 a month, right? And what I've done here is I take $80 a month, that's your monthly payment. So if you do all these upgrades, you're gonna save $80. And then this is an interest rate, and this is how much you can borrow for that $80 that you're gonna save. They say you're gonna save, but you might not actually save. You might actually be paying more for electricity, okay? But they're saying you're gonna save. So let's just take them for their word. So right now, if interest rates were 1%, you could borrow 21 grand, so you might be able to replace the furnace, do a couple windows. And is that gonna save you $80 a month? Maybe, kind of hard to say. But if you go to 5%, now you can only borrow $13,000. That's just a heat pump. That's not the windows, that's not the insulation, so you're gonna end up paying more than likely. And interest rates are more than 5% right now if you look. This is being generous. They could go up, they could go down. And we've known in California, they've had PACE there for a long time. They did billions of dollars of PACE loans. And they've got some lessons for us. This is from their Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. They say that PACE assessments can also make it more difficult to sell or refinance your property because there's a lien placed on there, like I told you. And what happens is, or what happened in California, is the PACE loans went through the contractors. They were just signing people up digitally, loaning them money and saying, oh, it's free, you don't have to worry about it. And then everybody got slammed with these huge property taxes, and a lot of people ended up losing their homes. Okay, contractor made out, government made out, banks made out, homeowners lost. Okay? So is it being proposed in BC? Yes, it's here, it's on 4 separate occasions, 2014, 16, 17. It was proposed by the UBCM, that's the Union of BC Municipalities. And, you know, it's in there, just trust me, you can read all that later. This is getting boring, so I'm gonna skip forward. Other Clean BC housing initiatives, they want mandatory energy labeling like I talked about. So right now you can do an EnerGuide audit on your house, it's gonna cost you $600. They'll send that information to the government will know exactly what's in your house, do you have a furnace, da 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 da. And then you gotta pay another $400 to get another one, and then if they agree, you get that money back. So that's what's gonna happen with the mandatory energy labeling. And then of course, in 2024, all the subsidies will stop for high efficiency gas furnaces. So right now, if you buy a gas furnace, the best one, you get a small subsidy along with that, and that's gonna stop next year. Now, we're doing for time. Am I going too fast? Trying to load you guys up, give you all the information you need, okay? Be lots of time for questions here. So, is it even possible to switch all the cars in BC? Because that's what the government wants to do. We do other presentations about the Zero EV Act. It's the Zero Emission Vehicle Act. Came out in 2019, now it's in its first reading to get updated. They've moved the target ahead. They want 90% of vehicles to be zero emission by 2030 now. It used to be 2040. There's some stuff in the back of the room about that if you want. But is it even possible? Well, this is all the energy in British Columbia. This is electricity. That's it. This is biofuels. This is diesel and gas. And this is natural gas. And about that much of it, natural gas, is used for heating homes. So if you can imagine that coming over to the electricity side, it would be a little bit less because heat pumps are more efficient, so they say. And then this is for industry. And just for context, you guys know about Site C? That'll be started, well, it started a long time ago, and there's a long storied history, but it'll be done in 2025. That's Site C. That's relative.
Is it still at 5.1?
That's the 5.1 number is what I got from BC Hydro. That's where I got that. You don't think so? Think it'll be less?
Sorry, what is Site C?
So Site C is a dam in northern British Columbia. It was proposed in the 50s, and they flooded a huge valley. I think it's on the Peace River, and they finally got it done. And it's a big boondoggle. It's cost billions of dollars. It'll come online in 2025. So this is 2021. This is all of the electricity we generated in all of BC. It was 64 terawatt hours. So this is how much we used, because some energy we import. Go ahead.
Is that energy not North American wide? All of our hydro dams are shared electricity with the North American Equipment Reliability Corporation?
So there's, I'm trying to simplify it, but yeah, the grid is all interconnected, and yes, people buy and sell energy between Alberta, Montana, Washington, California. It's a massive, it's a very complicated thing, so I try not to get into that, but this number comes from BC Hydro. This is how much electricity we used in 2021. Okay, that's what this number is. So that's 150 years of resource development in British Columbia got us to that number, and we were pinned out that winter. We actually maxed out on the grid. It happens in the winter time, not summertime. The highest electricity draws happen in the winter time when everybody's heating with electric heat. That's how the grid works. That's how it works. So this is how much power, this is a power equivalent. If we turned all the gasoline that was sold in British Columbia into energy and converted into electricity, that's 41 terawatt hours. If we took all the diesel sold and converted it directly into energy, that's another 22. So that's at parity, energy equivalent wise. If we add on all the natural gas heating for all the homes in BC, that's another 22 terawatt hours. So you're starting to see like this is a big problem here we're trying to solve. 87 terawatt hour shortfall. Now, the argument against this is say, well, Jeff, you know, cars are more efficient now. They don't use, like energy-wise, an electric car is more efficient. Yes, that's true. But there's energy losses on the lines, and you know, they're like, so take 30, 40, 50% off of that even. Take 70% off of it. It's still not happening, okay? It's not happening without some either big sacrifices or some big changes to the supply side. And there's Site C, 2025.
So I'll ask you guys, do you think it's possible to electrify BC? They want to electrify all the homes and electrify all the cars. You guys think it's possible?
No way.
Well, I say this, don't be so negative. There's a way. When there's a will, there's a way, and BC Hydro has a way. And it's not a very nice way, so I want to show you guys what it is. So we only have so many levers. We've got supply and demand, right? So one is we can increase our power input, increase the supply. So already BC Hydro has put out a call for power for another 4,000 gigawatt hours, which is almost equivalent to Site C. So it's after Site C comes online. They want another Site C by 2027. So we can increase the efficiency, so that's this hard push to get all this more energy efficient stuff, because they know that moving everything over the grid is going to be very difficult. And then, because we don't talk about cars so much, but cars are going to be a huge draw on the grid, all that energy when it's coming over with EVs. So we can decrease the number of cars, and we can decrease the number of kilometers those cars drive. And this is some of the other presentations we do. We go into the other parts of the climate plan, and we show you that that is exactly what the plan is. They want to reduce the number of cars and reduce the kilometers those cars drive, because that's the only way this is going to work. Yeah. We can get into some other things like timed usage, so there's peaks and troughs throughout the day. If we can even that out, move that energy from the peak demand and put it in a more convenient spot, we can use the same amount of energy, right? Because you have your capacity that you can produce, but if everybody wants it at that one spot, if we just move it over here, it's better. And then we can start doing things like smart appliances that limit how much energy they use, and they can be remotely controlled, like your thermostat in your house. You think this is science fiction? It's real. They have it in Europe. They have it in Colorado. There's a big story there where the utility turned on everybody's air conditioning in the summer. Okay, they signed a little thing. It was voluntary, and they got a special smart thermostat in their house. And when the grid was under load, they just turned the temperature up in their house, so they couldn't run their air conditioning. It's all remote controlled by the utility. All these orange things are called something. There's a name for it. It's demand side management. Demand side measures. And that's limiting the amount of demand. So, this is from a document called the Signpost Update. Right now, BC Hydro is going back and forth with the BC Utilities Commission. This is the actual numbers now. So I want to explain to you what we're looking at here. So they came out with something called the Integrated Resource Plan in 2023, and there's 3 scenarios. I'll just break it down to 2. One is the reference load forecast. They think this is the most accurate load forecast, okay? And then they came out with a plan in 2021, and by 2023, they realized that this base forecast was low, and that those demand side measures weren't working. So they realized that we would be short. We would be a net importer. By 2029, we'd be 1,000 gigawatts short. That's after Site C comes online. So they said we need an extra 4,000 gigawatts to plug that gap. Right now there's a call for power to plug that gap. The problem is, okay, so this is a 2023 reference. This is the updated one. So they realized they were short. They added the 4,000 to it, and now they've got a new reference forecast. So it took them 2 years. They realized they were way off. That's there. Now this one here is called the accelerated electrification scenario. So this would be accelerated electrification, like if, I don't know, the government mandated everybody switch over to heat pumps, and now we have all electric heating because of CO2 in the environment. This would be like if they said 90% of vehicles must be electric by 2030, which is happening right now. That's what's happening in the law. So now they're showing that we're actually 3 Site C dams short after Site C comes online. So the reality is, we don't know where we are right now, and BC Hydro is going back and forth, and I've been in contact with BC Hydro, and I had one person confirm that this number here was based on the old policy from the government, not the new one. And then I had another person confirm that we're still here, but we're moving up a little bit. So we're somewhere in between. So this new policy, we think, and they think, is going to push us there. That's the interpretation. And if we get new information, then we'll have to change that, but that's what it looks like right now.
So what happens when one of the generators at Site C isn't able to be commissioned?
Do you know something about a generator at Site C? Do you got all the wrenches in your toolbox?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, generator 4 is down. It's a big bad thing, so.
Oh,
Yeah, so somebody poured the wrong concrete into the mix, and we're talking obviously hundreds or thousands of cubic yards of concrete into the pour, so.
but is this public information?
It is now. You work there, you know somebody who works there, so.
Wow. Okay, I've been through all of BC Hydro stuff with a fine tooth comb, and I haven't heard that, so thank you for the information.
It just happened, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago.
Can you repeat his comments for us?
So, sorry, the fellow here, I guess he works up at Site C, and what he said was that somebody got the mix wrong on the concrete, and they poured, was it hundreds of yards of concrete, he said, around the generator number 4, and because it's the wrong type of concrete, which probably has the wrong compressive strength, it's not gonna hold, so they're not gonna generate force offline. So it's not gonna make the 5.1 terawatt hours we thought it was.
As a construction engineer that wants to sign off on it, you know, but.
Yeah, very interesting, thank you for that, thank you. So this is the integrated resource plan. And here they're telling us, so they, like I told you, they came out with a plan in 2021, they had to update it in 2023, they realized they were one Site C gap short after Site C comes online, now they're gonna be even more short. So, but here they tell us, don't worry, they say, we have an energy and capacity surplus, guys. Okay, but then you read on and you get to the qualifying language and you find out what they mean. They say, yeah, we have a surplus with additional demand side measures. We have enough electricity, guys, if you use less. We got lots. We can keep supplying you forever as long as you use the right amount. But if you use too much, we don't have that. That's what they're telling you. So here's their definition of demand response technology. So when I was telling you guys about those thermostats that automatically control the temperature, it says here, the ability to manage the demand such as electric vehicle charging and home appliances. So this is the thermostat in your house, this is your vehicle charger. So everybody's switching over to an EV. You want to charge your EV because you got to charge it often to drive and go on long drives. Well, you jump in, and if it hasn't been charged because it's the wrong time of day, you're not going to be able to do that. Everybody thinks, well, we'll just charge them at night. That's when everybody's heating their homes with their electric heating. You know, like when is going to be the right time? We don't know how that's really going to work out, and that's what they call the smart grid. All the appliances in your home will be directly controlled. It'll be voluntary. They'll be directly controlled by BC Hydro, right? And people don't really realize what they're giving up. They're letting the government actually come in and control the devices in their house, because BC Hydro is the BC government. Okay, it's a crown corporation. So what do they say about their demand side measures? And this is all right from BC Hydro stuff. There's a link there if you guys want to check it. It says that in their assessment, pursuing more demand side measures would increase bills. They'd have to go to time varying rates, and it would increase the risk to ratepayers and end up with more expensive electricity. Now, what do you guys think is the most effective demand side measure? If I want you to use less of something because I only have a little bit, okay, supply demand, what's the most effective thing I could do? You got to increase the price. So this is the argument that always comes up. They say, guys, don't worry. The price of electricity is regulated by the government. You don't need to worry about the price going up, guys. It's going to stay the same. But you see, they want to come in your house and control how much you use, so they're telling you the price is going to stay the same. Do you really believe them? No, what's going to happen is they're going to get to a spot, because maybe we're undersupplied from Site C, maybe there's too much demand from EVs, maybe the stuff they're doing isn't working, and they're just going to increase the price. That's the only thing they can do. So all the money that you're saving now by switching over to a heat pump, what's going to happen when they increase the price? You're not saving any money. They lied to you. So let's talk about the BC government. Now, this is just starting to become a thing because there's an election coming up. We have our MLAs are talking about it here in Kamloops now. But actually, originally, this came out back in August. This was the BC Business Council. They have a master's degree economist who went through the Clean BC program. Clean BC, for those of you who don't know, is the BC government's policy for managing the environment and all the stuff they want to do. And in there's a link, they included the Excel sheets where they showed what would happen to the economy based on what they're gonna do. And this economist looked at it and he couldn't believe his eyes. In their own Excel sheet, they said the economy would go down by $28 billion. And they're telling you all, it's gonna be great, it's gonna create so many jobs, because there's, 1,000 people are gonna lose jobs, but we're gonna create 300 new ones. The economy's gonna go down. That's the result. So, for those of you who don't know, we do pay a carbon tax here in BC, and we were the first province to do it in Canada. And it is true, the Liberals had a cap on it. This is a great talking point for the now United. BC United, thank you, BC United. I get confused between Alberta and BC sometimes, Bernie. So it was capped at $30 a ton until 2017. And what happened then, Christy Clark signed a document called the Vancouver Agreement, and that was, she basically stood up and said, well, we're going to keep it at $30 a ton until other people start raising it, because they're not going to raise it in BC unless other people do it. But then everyone started raising it, because that's when Justin Trudeau rolled out the Pan-Canadian framework, which required accountable increases in greenhouse gas reductions from all provinces. So now we're at $65 a ton, and it'll be $170 a ton by 2030. So when I showed you guys the bill for my house there, it was $1,400 a year on natural gas to keep that home. $180 of that was carbon tax. So by 2030, I'll be paying almost $600 in carbon tax to keep the same home. So they're going to try and push me into electric, but I bet by then the price of electricity is going to go up. So I don't know if the economics are going to work. And here's the actual spreadsheet that I was telling you about, to be honest. It says right here, this is really small, but this is a reference scenario. It shows the GDP of British Columbia is $317 billion, and this is with Clean BC, 289. $30 billion loss in GDP. And here's the chart. Here, the economist is showing us that we're going to go down. GDP per capita will drop $52,000 down to $47,000 per capita. That's like depression level. That's a massive, massive drop. It's going to be a huge hit to the economy. Here he shows it again, 0.4% GDP growth. So, it's not looking too good, guys. This sustainable development, remember we said at the start, I said it's about everything, and it really is. We all thought it was just about the environment, but it's actually about so much more. Okay, and we barely covered half of it. Actually, we could probably continue. I can talk to you guys for hours if you want. There's so much more. But sustainable development is not just about the environment, it's about everything. The biggest thing you're going to notice in your life, starting now, especially over the next 5 years, is these mandated CO2 cuts, because we have to hit these levels by 2030. That's through the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to try and electrify everything, because we have to reduce the CO2. And to do that is going to require sacrifices. You're going to have to make sacrifices. That's the only way it's going to happen. And the government wants to force energy upgrades on older homes. To do that, it's going to increase property taxes, reduce your sellability, and increase costs and reduce home ownership while we're having a housing crisis. None of this is going to stop climate change. Okay. By the way, to all the new people here, do you guys think this sounds like wild, crazy, wacko conspiracy stuff? Does anybody think it's like wild, crazy? Did I do a good job of like proving it out? No? Right? Yeah. We've had some media coverage here in Kamloops that wasn't necessarily favorable, and they linked this to some wild and crazy stuff. Because there is, if you go Google stuff about what we're talking about, there's some wild and crazy stuff. This is all we're showing you what the government in Canada is talking about. You might come to a different conclusion, and that's the debate that I'd love to have. But all of this is going to be on our website, and all these links will be here for everyone to review. Every single picture you saw, every single document is linked on every single slide. It will be on the website.
Good job.
Okay, so what can we do for solutions? So like Justin told us so well at the very beginning, our politicians are influenced from so many different things. We vote them in there all alone for 4 years or 2 years, getting influenced by unions, special interest, big business. And this is what we have. We have this United Nations program that's being pushed through the federal government, provincial, local, and it's affecting us here in the community. And we think that the only way to really stop this, truly stop this, is to have a groundswell of the community to reject this. Because one, they're not being honest with us, what it is, and the more people that become educated on what this actually is, the opposition will grow. That's why we started this KCSC. So you can join us so we can push back from the bottom up. And the reason it has to come from the bottom up, I'll tell you, it's about the jurisdiction and how things are layered in Canada. So imagine, you know, Pierre Poilievre seems like he's probably going to get in. He's got a good chance next federal election. Imagine he's your guy. He's going to do every single thing that you want to get rid of this climate stuff. Well, for one, he's not. He's signed on with the Sustainable Development Goals. He told everybody at CBC he's going to keep going with the Paris Accord, which is required to do all this stuff. He'll keep it educated, he'll keep all that stuff. Okay? Unless he has a mandate or a huge pushback to stop it. So even if he does, okay, say, Pierre, come say this here in Kamloops. You just say, oh, I'm a federal politician. I have no mandate. I have no jurisdiction to come help you in Kamloops. That's a provincial matter. You'll have to talk to your province and your local government. So say we get somebody in the provincial government. You hear all the rhetoric now. We've got the United Party are talking now about how the climate plan is so bad. Before they were kind of okay with it, but now it's becoming a hot button issue. We've got the Conservative Party talking about it. There's a lot of pushback against it, right? So they get in. So say you get a guy like a Conservative, John Rustad, I think he's very opposed to all this stuff. You get him in, and you say, John Rustad, come say this here in Kamloops BC. You say, well, there's so much he can do at the provincial level. He can change some of the legislation. But when he goes to the UBCM, the UBCM comes in, that's the Union of BC Municipalities, and they're begging for more sustainable development. They're begging for it because all the local councils want it, because it's tied to money and grant money and everything else. So even if you get them in, you say, save us. The municipal government's telling they don't want it. So it has to start here. It has to start with us at the bottom level, okay?
That's right.
Now, we do have a couple solutions, specific solutions. No one's necessarily tried this before. This has never really been done as far as I know. But we talked about that thing called the OCP. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. But really what we want to do first, we have to educate the local government about this issue and give them the mandate. They have to know that the people aren't happy with what's happening. Because if you go into council right now and you say, you know, I heard that there's a United Nations plan, they're going to do a thing with the houses. Like, what do you want to do? It's not my jurisdiction, I guess. But the province is mandating this stuff. It's not my job. That's what they say, basically. But if we go in there with thousands of people, for instance, through the KCSC Association, and we say, we have thousands of people and we're all opposed to this. We'll keep voting you in and we'll support you. We'll give you that mandate. We want you to bring that power from the provincial government, from the federal government, hold here in Kamloops. If we support them, then they can start to change things. They can go to the UBCM, and they can go back to the provincial government, and then if you get a guy like Rustad or someone else in there, then maybe that's how it will play out, right? But we have to support them. So they're not our enemies in the council. They're just trying to do a good job. And the other specific thing we can do is target OCP. So that's the official community plan. That's the overarching bylaw. And then all the other plans, like the climate plan and everything else, are underneath that. If we can put a few lines in that official community plan that say, we don't want this, or it has to be economically viable, or if it increases the cost of housing, we recognize that this environmental thing is not that important. You know, like we can put specific things in there that would knock this out. So the provincial government is mandating, but we're stopping it here locally with the bylaw. That's the specific solution. You know, we just need practical, common sense language in there, because that OCP is only concerned with development and sustainable development. There's nothing in there about you in your house and your rights and your local neighborhood. It's just all about development. So that's why we need to target it. And that's it for now. It was a big, super long presentation, so I want to say thank you guys all for hanging in there. And I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to questions. But before we do that, can I ask all you guys, did you like this presentation tonight?
if you guys thought that this is valuable information and you would like to learn more, we have some of our other presentations on our website. If you go to kamloopscsc.org, you can see some of the other issues that we talked about. We cover stuff like technology, we cover the cars, that's all up there. And we're going to continue to do town halls. This is going to be our last one for this year, just because it's coming up to the holidays, but we'll start again in January. And the most important thing, guys, if you really think this is important, please consider joining the association. It is the most important thing you can do. Because while we all get together, you know, like our power grows, and we can show the council that yes, we are a force to be reckoned with. There's two nice ladies at the back, they can sign you up by paper, but we really prefer if you can do it online. Just go to kamloopscsc.org, it takes you 30 seconds on your phone, that's the best way to do it. And finally, the very last thing, I'll just pass it over to Glenn and go to questions. Thank you.
So, that seems old now, doesn't it? Better? Well, thank you, Jeff. That was a wonderful presentation. And I bet you everybody feels numb on one end and dumb at the other. But yeah, seriously, the only way this all works is if we have numbers. One of the previous slides that you had was it showed how many people talk to our representatives. You have NGOs, non-governmental agencies. You have business groups. You have everybody else talking to our politicians at all levels. And the politicians talk amongst themselves. We need to get into that conversation, and we do that by membership. So, any questions?
He brought up about the electricity, what, 61T or whatever it was.
Terawatts?
Is that for everybody that produces electricity in this province? Alcan, Weyerhaeuser, other pulp mills and that, is that included?
And how about Highland Mountain?
Okay, so to answer that question, that's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that, but I think what the fellow is talking about is industrial users have their own generators that supply their own electricity to
sell
their
it.
operations because it's cheaper, or more efficient, more reliable than using BC Hydro.
They sell it to BC Hydro.
So yeah, okay, if you guys sell back, then that's included, right? But what you use off to the side, I don't know if that's included, because that's a private electrical grid, right? So I don't have the answer to that, but if you sell it back to BC, then that's included. So that's called Energy Purchase Agreement in EPA, and just so you guys know, the 4,000 gigawatt hours that BC Hydro has called the power, they need that by 2027 or else we're in a deficit. That's on the base plan, not the accelerated one. That's all coming from EPAs. It's all coming from private producers. So they don't have the capacity themselves. It's going to have to come from Alberta or other industries. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I got another one.
Yep.
You said about this pace where you can have it put onto your taxes, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, once you hit a certain age in this province, if your taxes are up to date, you can forego your taxes, you pay a penalty. So why can't I just go and do that thing? And the next person that buys my house, he's paying my property taxes and my fees.
Well, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
He's still not gonna wanna buy your house if you got a huge base loan on it. He's gonna say, wow, that's a drag, why would I buy your place for $1,000 more with this base loan when I can go down the street and get one without that? Right? Yeah. It's just gonna make it less desirable.
Yeah. So like, how this is going to work, it's not entirely clear. But this is a bit of an experiment, and in every jurisdiction in North America, it's worked a little bit differently. So there's not one fast and hard way that it's going to work. But there's a lot of policy information. Some of the links are in the presentation. You can go to the different, like the Penn Institute is one. They talk about it, what the government's actually going to do and how the legislation will work. We don't know. But they literally have to change the law so they can take that first place lien on your home.
Another factor that a lot of people don't realize is when they go to heavy up, like if you want to have like, I have a natural gas stove upstairs because I put tenants downstairs and I need the electrical, well, I've only got, 125 amp, right? So if I have to heavy up and go to 200 amp, which is probably what you have to do if you want to charge an electric car, well, you're responsible from the street or the connection all the way to your house. And if you've got an older house in an older neighborhood, anywhere downtown or anywhere, it's direct buried cable, you have to upgrade that trench and that whole conduit all the way to your house. You gotta hire them to come and unhook your you're talking $6,000-7,000.
Because in Alberta, or sorry, in Aberdeen, everything's trenched in conduit here in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
You guys have no hydro poles.
But those trenches that are newer, you're
Yeah.
probably okay to pull the wire for the 200 amp, right?
Yeah.
But anywhere outside of that area, you're gonna be responsible for that trenching. You gotta hire a backhoe, do the whole thing yourself. And I know somebody did, it was $15,000 just to get that, not even including the box and the electrical and the electrician
That was
and furnace.
for EV.
That was to
For
heavy
EV.
up, to get the house to 200 amp.
Right.
It's from 100, they only had 100.
Another thing that's coming in the building code will be to put an EV charger. So they want all the homes to be EV charge ready.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to upgrade to 200 amp system and a fast charging system.
Or you want to shut down your EV production.
Who ends up paying for, let's say 4 or 5 people on the cul-de-sac, heavy up, and then the sixth person affects the transformer downstream. So, now,
Yeah,
one
then
person
they
is
have to-
responsible for replacing the transformer.
No, the Hydro would pay for the transformer.
We were in a situation one time in a recreational property where the transformer cost is passed on to us to upgrade this panel.
Yeah. Yes. You're responsible for anything from the road to your house.
Yeah, so we were gonna be responsible for the transformer.
Oh, that's outrageous.
I have a question regarding heat pumps, because
Yes, sir.
it seems that the province is promoting heat pumps. You say you have one in your house.
I do not have a heat pump in my house. I have a 80% efficient gas furnace, and it works great.
In 1980, I built a house down the road here, and I installed a heat pump, and I found that it effectively heated the house down to about freezing. But below freezing, I still had to have my natural gas heater. And during the summer, there's no AC. Heat pump, there was no AC. I don't know if things have changed since then, but there was no air conditioning for heat pump. So heat pump may be useful down the lower beam line, but I don't see that it's that effective.
So there are new heat pumps. They're called cold weather heat pumps, and they claim to be able to go down to -25. But anecdotally, a lot of people have claims that they don't work that well, and what happens is when they get colder and colder, they have to run more and more cycles. The numbers I've seen, I was just talking to a fellow about this, is 2.2, so that's 220% efficient energy-wise, but that still means that it has to run quite a bit, and I think your electricity bill will be high. And like I said, anecdotally, I've heard a lot of stories. I heard somebody in here told me a story about somebody paying $1,000 a month after they upgraded in the wintertime.
My bill went way up with the heat pump. I put one in once, 12 grand, and I'll never do it again, because my bill went way up.
How much was your bill per month?
I can't remember, but it was in Lower Aberdeen, and they convinced me to put a heat pump in 90, it was a house built in 92, and it was just stupid, just stupid. But it did have air conditioning in the summer, but I thought, you know what, if you were in, the shoulder seasons is when it would work, but it almost never worked in the winter. I would still run the furnace, and I would just never put one in again, because it works really good in mild temperature places. It doesn't work in Kamloops where we get really cold. But when you need it, it's not there, basically.
I'll clarify a little bit of that. So I'm a mechanical engineering background too, and my
Maybe you could
specialty.
stand up so we can hear you.
Put them on the mic.
It's mechanical engineering, and my background, I've been in the construction industry for about 20 years, doing project management now. Seasonal energy efficiency rates, what you want to look for in a heat pump, and you need to ensure that heat pump has got a reversing valve if you want cooling efficiencies in it. But aside from that, it does have a critical level where -20 is basically the highest technology of what they have. So if you want to look at a 2,000 square foot house, house and new heat pump that's going to be cooling and heating, you're going to be looking at least for probably a 4 to 5 ton unit to do that. And, you know, that would probably equate to his 80% indirect fire gas furnace, you know, for heat. Now, for cooling, you know, you still, if you replace your heat pump, you're going to spend 10 grand for a heat pump, supply and install. You're going to have to run a bunch of piping, you're going to have to put coils inside your ductwork, and then if you have a forced air furnace right now, you're going to have to replace it with a makeup air unit. So, you know, as far as I'm aware, I did BC building code in 2012, 2019 building code, I believe in part 10 requires, and with the step code requires you to have makeup air into your house. So if you're going to replace your furnace, you're going to have to now include makeup air. So if you include makeup air, now you're going to require to go for ASHRAE standards and whatnot with respect to occupancy in your household at any given time, what your exchange rate is for fresh air and return air. Right now, we all use 100% return air, right? So you go and do that, you're going to spend 10 grand for a heat pump, you're going to go spend 5 grand for a new ventilator that's going to be able to overcome the airflow requirements and the static pressure of your system. And you have, like most households these days, flux duct and stuff like that tucked in away in the ceiling or in the joist spaces, you're looking at high static pressure, high static loss performance. So you're going to increase the price of your air ventilation again more. So just if you cascades, honestly, I've done some quick math. I figured I'd hold my father here, so you're going to be looking at $20,000 I think today if you replace your furnace in the next. If you replace your furnace now, that's fine, but if you do it after these next steps kick in, you're going to be spending 20 grand for
Thank you very much.
Quick question, how effective are heat pumps at say -30 or -40?
Not.
They're not, the best you can get right now is efficient down to -25. And then the key part of the story is when it goes down to -20 or -10, people switch over to gas. So a lot of contractors will install gas and a heat pump. Because in the summertime, heat pump is air conditioning, saves you money. In the intermediate time in the fall, heat pump saves you money. But when it's cold, it doesn't. So that's when you spend all the money in the winter time.
And you can look it up yourselves. If you go and look into, it comes down to thermodynamics and it's what refrigeration that they use. So R22 is an old school refrigeration. R134A is another one that they're kind of phasing out. R410A is another one. If you go look up what kind of refrigeration is going to allow you to have -30, -40 effectiveness, you're probably not going to come across anything right now.
Thank you for your knowledge. It's always good to hear. Okay, question, yes, sir.
Okay, question, yes, sir.
I just had, I listened to your presentation, very good, and it outlined a lot of problems that it seems like it wasn't foreseen by those people who are making the decisions. So that's what I got from what you presented, that there needs to be a better way of looking at this, and maybe there's even some things about, I'm getting a feeling like I'm not very well informed. I need to be more educated. But I don't like to be fooled, and I don't know if you're saying that in some ways we're being fooled, or is it just trying their best to accommodate the Agenda 21? Yeah.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. So I think very clearly, if we stay within black and white and what's on paper, we're doing what's required by law. It's the law in Canada. That's it. So whether, if you want to attach motive to that, and did people know better, or did they know that these are going to be the consequences? Those are questions for the people that wrote that legislation. I don't know the answer. I can speculate, but everybody's got an opinion, and that's not worth much. But I can tell you what's in black and white, and what we presented here was what's in black and white, and that's what's most important. Because we could spend all night long wondering why. But definitely, I think what I can say, like, this is my personal opinion, and I think based on the evidence, I think it's like a well fleshed out opinion, is that the government's not necessarily being 100% honest. They know that we're gonna have to make some sacrifices, and that part is not being advertised. They're leading with clean air, children playing, walking to work, riding your e-bike, but they're not telling you that you might have brownouts and, you know, someone's gonna be controlling your thermostat in your house. Like, if they were telling you that, you would have a totally different perspective. So the reason why we do this really is to give you guys context. Because you're hearing one side of the story, and maybe this is just the other side of the story. So now, like, at least you have some balance. I can't tell you what to think, but like, I hope you see, like, if you listen to the government's not linking all this stuff, and they're not telling you, and they're not showing you the numbers, they're giving you a marketing spiel, right? So they want you to agree with it. I want you to agree with me that this needs more discussion. So I think that's the best thing you can take away, is that we all need more education on it. I saw there was a question back there.
Can
Yes.
you please explain who the UN are?
The United Nations?
Yeah. And how they became, do you know?
Well, I think it came from the League of Nations after World War II. That's my understanding.
Were they voted on?
Sorry?
Were they voted on?
Well, no, and that's another debate, and you know, this is where if you start reading on the internet, it's going to get into a little bit of the stuff. But the United Nations is not a democratic organization. Nobody votes for it, but countries put people in it. So then they say, well, you voted for these people, and those people put someone in. But when they decide what everybody's doing, and that is coming down to the local level, is that really democratic? I would argue no. I think that's not a very controversial take on it, but that's what I would say. I saw a question over here, yes. Right, okay. Yes, sir.
Isn't the UN a prime example of what you alluded to earlier as a non-governmental organization? Like, really, that's what they are. They were never voted in, and most non-governmental organizations that are controlling the municipalities and the government, for that matter, are not voted in, and they come under that criteria. Do
So
they not?
yeah, whether I don't know if I'd call it an NGO, but I guess it's kind of a weird. It's not a government. Yeah, I guess it's an NGO.
They're not government.
But
They're
when
not
Justin did that slide at the beginning where it showed the politician that was being influenced by all the different levels of government and lobbies and NGOs, the UN is a very influential part of that on all levels of government.
And if truth be known, Agenda 21 really stemmed from the World Economic Forum and loosely the United Nations. That was their mandate way before it was adopted by government. So to answer that lady's question truthfully, is UN is a unelected group that are influencing our governments with money.
I could agree to that.
Okay.
I didn't vote for them. They've got lots of money and they're influencing the government.
You bet.
Those 3 points,
Okay.
100%. 100%.
And didn't we just sign up for UNESCO?
Yeah, and guys, so this is one thing, like, you can go online, you can see me talking in city council. Kamloops City Council just signed up for something called the UNESCO Touchy-Feely Cities or something, I can't remember what it's called. But it's literally UNESCO is in the city, and now we're rewriting some of our policies in Kamloops. We're paying someone to rewrite them so that our policies match UNESCO. And we brought it up, and everyone's like, "Why do you care? Why do you care if the UN? Why what? They're, you know?" But it's like, well, we should be making the decisions and writing our policies here. And even if we are writing it to match them, that's a one-size-fits-all policy. How could they possibly understand what we're doing here in Kamloops, and why would we change what we're doing to match what they're doing? It doesn't make any sense.
Taxpayer money going to a contractor writing yet another report.
The DEI contractor, yeah. There's a private consultant getting paid to do this. And another example of this on the provincial level is recently, you guys heard about the new EDMA, it's the Emergency Disaster Management Act. That's replacing the Emergency Program Act. So this new act is based on the United Nations Sendai framework. So now on a provincial level, under the NDP, we're rewriting our entire emergency disaster management program to match up with the United Nations. So again, it's like, well,
how is the United Nations gonna help BC? Like, Canada is a first world country, we're a leader among nations, why are we changing our stuff to match theirs? They should be learning what we're doing here and changing their stuff to match us. You know, like we've been having disasters in British Columbia since people got here. We've been having wildfires and floods and everything, snow, you know, rock slides, it happens all the time. We're experts at it. Why do we need the UN to tell us how to do it in BC? It doesn't make much sense. So you can bet, like that's another level of influence.
Hey.
Got some questions there, yes?
Going back to when you were talking about the electrical usage here in British Columbia, and you said that over that we would be purchasing from other sources. So I asked the question, who in Canada has other sources that we can purchase from, and would they also be in the same situation that we are in?
Yes, yeah, so it's not just British Columbia that's following the electrification plan. California did it, they're having massive brownouts, they're a big customer of ours. Alberta's getting rid of all of their coal plants, they're switching over to windmills and solar panels, right? Like, this is not just restricted to BC. So we're lucky, we have so much hydropower here, but we're hitting the rev limiter right now. We're already pinned out. So when they say we want to get another 4,000 gigawatts, we're going to get it through these EPAs. And I confirmed that with BC Hydro. I said, where are you getting it from? Is it EPAs? They said, yeah, it's EPAs. Where are you getting it from? They even say in their integrated resource plan that they're making assumptions that that electricity is there. Okay, so one of the places it could come from would be Montana. They've got coal power plants down there. And then the other place is Alberta, but Alberta shut down all their coal power plants. So, you know, if everybody's doing the same thing, where is the extra power gonna come from? It's gotta come from us, or it's not gonna come from anywhere. To answer your question.
Nuclear.
Yeah, go ahead.
10 years. On the slideshow there, was there an example, like BC Hydro has a level 2 power, price, so if you're using X amount of kilowatt hours, you go into peak demand, now you're using level 2 pricing, right? So when we find this heat pump, right, because it's extra efficient for everybody in Kamloops, is there a scenario where we run through now the additional electrical draw and in comparison with where the two levels cut off? Because I'm just curious, like, are we gonna hit a service factor, you're gonna hit that service factor, and actually the majority of your kilowatt hours is gonna be charged at a higher rate, right?
Yeah, so that's the price risk.
Jeff, can you summarize this to people about?
Okay, so what he's explaining is BC Hydro. On your bill, even for residential, there's a certain amount you can use that's at a low price, and once you exceed that amount, there's a higher unit rate that you pay. Step 2. So what he's saying is now that you're going to be using more electricity, is that step going to be in the same place? So if you only use this much electricity before, but you switch all of your energy use to electricity, that step rate is there, so the majority of your use is going to be at the higher rate. And that's not a question, like, I don't have the answer, but definitely it's going to increase your bill, for sure. Yes, sir?
Can you address solar panels and the solar energy?
The address is China, that's where they come from.
So I've been recently inundated with brochures about that. And so they say, if you want to install solar panels on your roof, and you upgrade your roof first, you'll have an engineer come in and do an assessment. As soon as the assessment is complete, does that go to the government?
So, okay, this is a really good question. I think this ties into the question he asked is, if he had somebody come to his house asking about solar panels, and they have to send an engineer to look at the place and they do an assessment, and then does that assessment go then to the government, and you get flagged as a house that's ready for solar panels? Okay, well, I don't know the answer to that, and I'll find out now. That's a really good, interesting thing, because I know people who can answer that question for me. But with the EnerGuide audits that they do on your house, when they put the vacuum on the door, they come around, they write everything down, they come up with this huge report, a 3D scan of your house and all the information. That gets sent to the government. That's what the government's getting by offering that grant money for you to do that. Okay, so that might very well be happening.
There's that coming, pushing that.
Yeah, if they're pushing that for a grant, then the government will more than likely get it, and that's probably why they're giving the grant money out, is to encourage you to do
The
that.
solar panels work, how would they help? Like those two of my neighbors.
That they're attachments.
So-
They will never replace the main, but they can be added. So, yeah, but that's only one section.
But then you have to pay for them, and
And
then,
then it's a battery storage. It's not just that clean, that's all I put about solar panel, I'm good.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work like that. Just ask any German.
So we got a little side conversation about solar panels going on, and it is changing, like, solar panels are getting better and better. I just read an article the other day, the most efficient solar panels now at between 39 and 40% efficient. So what that equates to compared to the current version, like if you had panels put on 20 years ago, they were like 15 to 17% efficient. So like, this is experimental in a lab. You're not buying this off the shelf, but the technology is slowly getting better. But all the old panels will eventually end up in the dump because you lose a certain percentage. You lose, I think it's about 0.5% per year on solar panels. So if you've got a 300, or let's just say 100 watt solar panel, just to make it easy, after year one, it's 99.5 watts. After year two, it's 99 or 98.7, and it keeps reducing every year. So it's imperceptible at the start, but after 30 years, you might notice that that huge bank of solar panels is not really doing the job. Plus you've got your batteries. Batteries have a life. They don't last forever. Those will need to be replaced. So that's another question. And then what's really interesting is about all of these climate plans, the stuff with the cars, all that stuff, they're switching they want to switch all vehicles with the city over to electric power. They only deal with the tailpipe emissions. So you've got an EV parked in your driveway, it's zero emissions. They don't talk about the embodied carbon, which means the carbon that went into digging that out of the ground, cooking the earth, creating and shipping here from China. They don't talk about that yet. So the government hasn't even addressed that. But that will come up later, and that might be a reason why those things will become more expensive later. We'll see. Yes, sir.
I have a question regarding geothermal. All of Sun River is geothermal. Is it electrically efficient for a brand new subdivision like Sun River's to go geothermal?
So the efficiency of the heat pump comes from your heat source. So the pump is just moving fluid. It's moving fluid from a place where you want heat to a place where there is heat. So if you have geothermal and you've invested the money and dug the holes in the ground and you have a geothermal reservoir, then that would be the most efficient heat pump because it's taking something that's already 13 degrees Celsius and tripling that and then bringing it into your house to 30 degrees. Whereas when you run a heat pump outside and it's minus 30, it has to take like 0.5 degree Celsius 100 times to get it up to 30 degrees, and that's why you end up with such a draw. That's kind of like did I get that? Is that like the layman's way to understand it?
I think geothermal is good, but you look at the ROI, your pumping capacity, how far you gotta drill into the ground, at $100 a foot, depending on what kind of ground you're drilling.
Yeah, so his question was just about electricity. So if you ignore the upfront cost of drilling, and drilling is crazy expensive. Drilling's not cheap. So if you have that geothermal reservoir, like say if you had a lake in your backyard that was always 1 or 2 degrees, like that's a great reservoir. You don't have to drill for that. But if you had to drill it, that's gonna cost a lot of money. Will it pay off in the end? Hard to determine. You'd have to look at the economics for each situation. Question in the back.
Yes, I just read today that a community kind of like this in Creston put out a notice to their mayor and council, each individual person on the council, to have to disclose any foreign influence in their lives by today. Have you heard of that? And is that something we can put forward to our council?
I don't know enough to comment on that, but I did see a video that came out of Creston before. So there are other groups in Canada that are doing something similar. They're talking about climate plans, but they're not doing the same thing that the KCSC is doing. And in my opinion, they're making it a step too far
because I think they're coming to conclusions that the data doesn't really support, and I don't know that that's a valuable thing to do at the city council. I'd have to look at it and find out more detail.
Just because we all know that the United, this is coming down from the UN, so we all know that's a foreign influence right there. So if
Right.
they don't admit it, I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it's all over the city documents. There's
Exactly. Yes.
there's no question about it. Yep.
Comment on that? You know how you fight that, Vicki? You get involved in your politics. You become informed, you become knowledgeable on the subjects. We, as a population, I'm guilty just the same, we thought our public duty ended at putting a tick on a piece of paper, whichever level of election, then we kind of forget about it. Some of us who are more diligent may spend more time pre-election vetting their candidates on who's going to give a name, but we left that time in between where we really didn't do anything. And that, as a whole population, we are suffering now because for lack of our voices to our representatives at various levels, we've had every other voice talking to it. So part of that is we want to fight having global agendas and stuff like that pushed down. We push up.
And that's why it's so important that everybody
Yes.
signs up to help support this movement.
Yes, please.
We need the numbers.
Please, guys, if you guys, and I'm really happy to see that there's so many people still here. That means that you guys are interested. So and I'll just ask this now too. You know, we do this all on donations. We donate our time. All the people here are volunteers. Nobody makes any money from this at all. This is definitely a money-losing proposition to be here tonight. I can tell you that. So if you guys appreciate this information and you appreciate this being brought to the community, please consider leaving a small donation at the back. Thank you very much. That's just the last time I'll say it, but it's all based on community donations. We don't have, unlike Radio NL or anybody who asks, we don't have any secret right-wing corporate donors. We're just people from the community here, and we're just trying to make it work. So we need you guys to join up to the association, please, and please consider joining us.
Let friends and neighbors talk to it.
I think collectively, we all have collectively as a group, more of a force.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. That's why we have the association. So you guys all came here tonight. The energy's here. Once you join the association, you put that energy into the association, and we keep going because we know everybody's busy, right? Don't throw your vote away. Put it there and have it so it keeps counting every day. So I think, guys, it's been a super long meeting, so let's just open it up, and if you guys want to talk and chat, and there's lots of great stuff in the back. We do have a contest, too, for anybody who's a member. You can throw your name in there. There's a $50 gift certificate from Home Depot. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Have a great night.
Thank you.